Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at MS Dynamics World. On this episode, I welcome back Steve Mordue to talk about the AI landscape that SMBs are facing today and how that led to his team's launch of a new AI offering, RapidClaw. It's an OpenClaw-based agent framework, which we should add made it to market before the reveal of Microsoft's latest autonomous offering category, Autopilot, and the first of Microsoft's agents in that category called Scout. Steve explains how he's made sense of some of the big choices today in the enterprise IT space, like pre-built services from hyperscalers, the rise of AI agents, different user interface options, and a variety of billing models. The RapidStart CRM team has opted for a very specific approach to developing and delivering agents to their clients, and Steve explains how they made some of those decisions, like the use of OpenClaw as an agent harness that each organization can host with full control. We also discuss how Steve sees costs shifting, some of the qualities of effective agents, and the importance of natural language-driven interfaces. All right. Well, Steve, thanks so much for joining me today. It's great to have you back. Always fun to talk. But, I was saying as we were starting, everyone knows who you are, but I don't think that's actually true. Can you give us a bit of an introduction, who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm CEO of RapidStart, as well as ForceWorks, which is the parent company of RapidStart. ForceWorks services business, RapidStart's an app business. We launched our first app in 2015 called RapidStart CRM, which is still our flagship app. And now we're converting over to AI as fast as we possibly can. And it's great to be back with you. We've had many conversations over the years. I've missed it.
Yeah, this is perfect timing, I think, to catch up. You've obviously been putting a lot of thought into where your business goes and where AI sort of takes, I would say, the Microsoft business application space overall. And they kind of have a really interesting positioning, perhaps, between the two. And, you've been working on this. So you just announced RapidClaw. Maybe just to preface sort of some of the things we want to talk about. So if people want to know what this is all about, can you maybe just give a little bit of a summary of what the announcements have been?
I started playing around with OpenClaw when it first launched 2-3 months ago. And like a lot of folks, I got my little Mac Mini, spun it up as a personal thing, and it was doing some little stuff for me. And I thought, I wonder what would happen if I plug this into, our RapidStart CRM, how that would work. There's a lot of fear at the time about, danger. Well, I think the danger was coming from people giving it open access to everything, giving it credit cards. And, if you're a solopreneur or you're just doing something for yourself, fine, YOLO, go ahead. But, inside a business, I wasn't thinking that was going to be the case. I was thinking, this will be something for my own personal use, but we're going to have to use Microsoft's official stuff for chat. And then I saw Microsoft actually going down the OpenClaw path with Omar Shaheen, started a group inside Microsoft to pursue that angle. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. Maybe I need to take a deeper look. So we talked to him several times, kind of shared some notes about some things we were doing about, how can you get agentic AI safe inside of an enterprise to be able to be used? That's everybody's biggest fear. But the next concern I think a lot of people have is, okay, let's say I'm over the safety aspect. I feel like it can be safe and secure. How the heck do I get it deployed? Because there's a lot of steps. If you go down the Copilot path with Microsoft or any AI path today, I mean, you pretty much have to be a systems engineer. You got to get into Azure. You got to get into Foundry. You've got to work with API. A lot of stuff people just aren't familiar with. So the hill to getting AI usable in your hands was just too high. So we spent an awful lot of our time really on automating all that to where it's really just a wizard and you're just clicking a couple of buttons and it's doing a bunch of stuff for you. And, an hour later, poof, you've got functional, AI in your organization that's secure inside of Microsoft. So that was the goal. And I feel like we're 95% there. We've still got a couple of rough edges we're working on, but we're getting very close to that.
Yeah, I mean, as I was looking at what you have announced and sort of how you're approaching this, my first thought was really, why not build on Copilot Studio? Why not use Azure AI Foundry as the back end? But it sounds like you really are trying to keep away from sort of the hyperscaler sort of ownership element of this and put almost all the control into your customers' hands. Is that part of the goal here?
Yeah, part of it. I think that when you look at OpenClaw, when it launched, and now some other clones of that have launched, they kind of looked at the problem differently, which is why it exploded so much. This idea that you could create, this agent pointed at your data and it could do stuff for you, and you could create other agents and they could work together as a team to do stuff. It was kind of a different way of looking at it. Copilot took a little different path, and I think Copilot still has, tremendous value, but it looked at it through a little different lens. And the angle that spoke to me really was on the business side. This idea of what OpenClaw was doing for personal productivity would bring a lot of value, if it were associated with the business side. So I just kind of put the head down and said, let's see what happens. And to be honest, I was a little concerned Microsoft might get a little annoyed and have the same question. Why aren't you just using OpenClaw? Well, we're spinning it up on an Azure VM. We're using Azure Foundry for the models. We're using Dataverse for the data. We're using Graph API. It's all Microsoft except this one piece, which frankly, for what I'm trying to accomplish, just works better. So, and then to see them turn around and launching it themselves internally as a test, but they've got, over 3,000 people inside the organization now fiddling with that. So they clearly see a direction. It wouldn't surprise me to see Microsoft kind of look at that as, that seems to be a direction a lot of folks are interested in. Maybe we need to nudge Copilot over more into that direction this time.
Yeah. And what do your customers want when they ask for AI, or they look at what you're offering? Are they looking for some pre-built capabilities that they can sort of drop into what they're already doing, or are they looking to sort of build their own carefully tailored new capabilities? How's that experience been for you as a provider?
What I'm seeing is both ends of the spectrum. They're either aiming too low or aiming too high. They're not really aiming where the value is. They're aiming too low. And I want to deploy a whole bunch of AI agents to read my email. Okay, come on. That's way too low hanging fruit. And there's a million ways to do that today with AI. Inside, outside Microsoft, however you want to do it. But the value of reading your email is really not all that great. When they first came out with all this stuff, that was one of the first things it would do is summarize all your email for you and save you 12 minutes a day. Well, I'm sorry, that's not big enough for 12 minutes a day. That's not it. Or they're coming from too big. I want to deploy AI to replace everybody in our company. Okay, well, that's not realistic either, but I would say that certainly the vast majority are shooting too low. They're aiming way too low over what can actually accomplish today. And the biggest thing in my mind is point it at the biggest challenge to ROI, or the biggest challenge to revenue, or the biggest challenge. Point it at the biggest challenge. They're running around pointing it at little nuisances and then complaining they're not really getting an ROI on their investment. Well, of course you're not. You pointed it at silly things. Pointed it at something important and give it the opportunity to actually generate some ROI. The customers that have been brave enough to do that, of course, are seeing, return on that investment, some massive returns on that investment. But we're still early. You remember the cloud, right? When cloud first came out, there's a lot of parallels, I'm not going to rent my software, I'm going to keep it on premise and I have control. All the things that they thought were important over time kind of faded, and now it's just normal. You wouldn't go spin up a server today for anything, So we're in that same phase with AI. And I'd say the larger companies are doing more POCs than the smaller companies and getting less value because they're just not ones to move. And that's unfortunate for Microsoft because that's the group they really need to engage and to move beyond another POC of an email summarizer,
Yeah. And the other thing I've got my eye on, I don't see too many people talking about this, but in some of the demos I've seen of agents that partners have released into Microsoft Marketplace even, or the ones that Microsoft's just recognizing to sort of show as real progress. I haven't dived into all of them in a lot of detail, but a lot of them some that I've seen, they look like they could have just been a Power Automate flow, or maybe a flow with an AI builder tool built, added to it that could have been done 3-5 years ago. I do wonder if that's one of the challenges or the mistakes that people might be making is building something, let's say Copilot Studio, that's the one I see the most, right? That building something there where it could have been a flow.
I think there's a place for both. I don't think there's a reason to change a deterministic Power Automate flow that does exactly what it's supposed to do, and it does it every time. I don't think there's any value gain from, hey, let's convert that to an AI agent. I also don't like the idea that Microsoft recently launched a Power Automate step where you can call an AI agent into your flow. I think you want to do one or the other. And there are projects inside a company. I've had people come to us say, hey, we want some AI agents. Look at what they're doing. And say, well, why aren't you just using a flow for that? And they're like, what's flow? Or, they don't even know what was already there to be able to solve that problem reliably. And there's a place to bring in non-deterministic stuff. But, there's a lot of places that just shouldn't be at all. Microsoft adding that step to Power Automate, I think, frankly, was a mistake. Keep those separate. Now you've just taken a deterministic building engine and added a wild card into the middle of it. That to me seems like a dangerous thing to have done and no upside. If you want that, go get build a Copilot.
Right. Especially as agents in Copilot Studio, for example, can now have process-based flows in them, I guess you would call it. I forget the exact terminology, but yeah, those two it'll be interesting to see how those two services sort of evolve in parallel to each other. They both serve a purpose, obviously, but there is going to be that tension, I think, like you said, and people using them, not maybe using the strengths of each one. Exactly right. I think my guess is that'll continue for some time here as the two shake out.
I mean, everybody now, every solution out there from any company has added some sort of an AI component, whether it needed it or not. So it's the thing you have to do, right? If you can't stamp AI on your product or your website somewhere today, you just look Stone Age. So we have people grappling for ways to justify stamping something. It doesn't need it at all. It works perfectly the way it is. AI doesn't improve a single bit. If anything, makes it worse. But they're still looking to somehow stamp that because FOMO. And I get it. I think another challenge that I read recently, Microsoft has 78 products with the Copilot name in it now. So 78 Copilots. I talked to Charles a couple of years ago because at that time there were already a couple of dozen Copilots. And the conversation I had with him was, I personally would like to have just one that does everything. Why do I need 20 different ones? And he agreed. He says, yeah, that is a North Star we're moving towards. And it may be some sort of an orchestrator or something, but that is the direction we're heading, is this idea that you're just going to deal with one. Well, it seems like they changed their mind somewhere since that phone call because now we got 78 of them. I don't think that is helping Microsoft with customers understand the story. There's too many different doors. They have no idea which door does what, why they would want one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think even with, Charles having even risen up the ranks further since maybe you last interviewed him now, he has other CVPs reporting to him. I do wonder if it's almost at a place like Microsoft inevitable that reining this kind of thing in is just going to be so difficult because you have so many motivated product managers and VPs who have their own goals and they want to put their stamp on these products, and fighting it as a leader probably is super challenging. That they all want to, everyone wants to contribute to this direction that the company has drawn a straight line on.
Well, contribute or at least get credit for it somehow. I remember several years ago, the mantra was one Microsoft. We're moving towards a one Microsoft. No more infighting between product groups. And it turns out that didn't happen at all. I mean, I don't think it's even slowed down. I think there's still infighting for credit within groups. Human nature, you're in a big organization. The last thing you want is your budget to get cut or your department to get cut or yourself to get cut.
Yeah.
So, they're going to fight with each other.
Another point that you've raised is, and we've sort of touched on it, but maybe to put more of a point on it, is the idea of looking at sort of the boring needs, the boring scenarios that could really have AI fill in. And this kind of gets back to where companies are going to invest. I have heard from other people just in passing, and especially from a few, I guess, consultants who have tried to talk about some of the real successes they've seen, where the message to an audience was, it's not going to be an exciting use case when you really get a lot of value out of an agent you develop or some AI you deploy in some scenario. Is that along the lines of what your thinking is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the low-hanging fruit. And what we're doing with RapidClaw is we're deploying an add-on into a customer's environment that's pre-enabled to do a bunch of basic things. But now that infrastructure is there for you to get much more creative. We use it internally. We use RapidStart on our own Rapid Start business, as we've deployed several agents internally through OpenClaw, just because it's a good tool for doing it, that have gotten very specialized in the things that they do. Low-hanging fruit examples would be just customer outreach, right? I mean, we've got leads coming in to our web properties from lots of different directions, right? Somebody signs up on Microsoft and Marketplace, they're hitting a contact button, they're going to the website, they're taking a test drive. There's about 8 different directions where people could be coming in to us. And we've got systems that automatically drop them into our system as a prospect. And for the most part, that seems to be about as far as it goes. We haven't had a lot of time or energy to go chase down everybody, kind of taking that approach. Hey, if you want our stuff, you'll work harder, which is not exactly marketing 101. But, we've deployed agents now into that space where whenever any of those things happens, that person's getting touched by somebody, which has to be better than them not getting touched. But it's beyond just, we were doing this before with Power Automate. And in a Power Automate flow, you could basically, using some variables, somewhat personalize a message, right? I mean, you could insert their first name, maybe insert, something, but not really personalized, it still looked like a form email, no matter what we did. So here, using the agent, it's able to kind of go look at their website, look at their company, look at their profile, understand who they are, what their business is, and come back with a highly personalized, very relevant message. That you're in this particular business. Maybe you want to also look at this tool or that tool. So I think those are the kind of things that are high value because it wasn't happening at all before, but it's doing a much better job than the old ways as well. In our case, that was something that wasn't being handled really at all. So the value is pretty obvious. But I don't think there's any organization out there that doesn't have, customers or prospective customers just falling through that aren't getting handled. You see it all the time. People complaining, hey, I reached out to this company, nobody called me back. So, that to me is really low hanging fruit and pretty easy to solve. And of course, this is all sitting in the system. Another decision I made, which I believe is going to prove to be smart, was there's a lot of folks out there building stuff with agents now that are relying on a memory markdown file in their system. That becomes like their database, is this memory markdown file, which makes a horrible database. Not only is it a horrible database, but they're spending a fortune because it's reloading that on every prompt. So they're spending a lot more than they need to.
This is holding an ongoing and a growing set of information, or is this just
it's holding a whole conversation. It's getting compressed by itself, losing some of that conversation, trying to retain important facts. So another part of what we did was we kind of separated the conversation, just the chit chat, from the facts. So any facts that are needed or any facts that are created during that session are actually stored in Dataverse. So they're there. They don't move. They don't go anywhere. They don't have to get loaded in every conversation. If you want to find out, if you're asking your agent, hey, tell me how much Acme bought from us over the last 7 months, it doesn't have to go into its markdown file and try and figure it out. It's going to jump into Dataverse and get the actual data. So kind of separating chit-chat data from actual data and keeping that in a place where it's not going anywhere, governable, viewable, I think it's important. We are moving towards headless systems, where we've made a living off of a system with a head, right? I mean, Rapid Start CRM was basically an app, but underneath the app was a data model, accounts, contacts, opportunities, cases. The basic foundation with all the fields necessary, the relations necessary, and the app really was just this layer on top that lets you look at it. Well, some people are still going to want that and still need that. And it's nice to know that you can jump over and go look at that if you want to. But the goal now, and what I'm finding myself doing more and more, is just talking in teams to the agent, asking it to do stuff. What call did I have last week? And it goes, oh, yeah, that's right. I remember that guy. Hey, go ahead and create a account and contact for him in CRM and add that as an activity. Sure, we'll do it right now. Now I just go on about my business. Before, I probably wouldn't have logged it at all, and if I did, I would have had to open an app and go in and fill out the information and do that stuff. Now I just ask an agent to do it and it just gets done. And now I can use that in the future anytime. When was I talking to this guy? Oh, we have this conversation here. You talked to so-and-so on such and such a date. Here's what you talked about. Oh, yeah, thank you. So I think we're going to see more and more of that. Charles had kind of famously said apps are dead not that long ago. I think that to a degree, I don't think they're dead. I think they're just kind of dormant. They're just sitting back there if you need them as a place to go. If I actually want to go look at something like that, I can. But in the day-to-day, yeah, I think I'm just going to be talking to agents in Teams. We've deployed it with a single agent in Teams, but there's a team of like 10 agents that do different things that have got very specific instructions about those particular things, so that you're communicating with one, but that one is turning around and communicating with whichever ones internally are best suited for getting an answer to that question or doing that job. I think it just makes it a little easier for the user than trying to figure out all the agents and have a chat conversation with 12 different agents that just talk to one. I mean, this stuff's smart enough to figure out where to go.
Yeah, it creates a whole new sort of user adoption, I think, paradigm almost. I'm personally, when I hear this, like my own personal way of working, like that doesn't sound good to me. Like I don't see myself ever going to sort of a natural language interaction type of a model for myself, but I'm really fascinated to see how it works more broadly and how many people really can shift over to that approach.
I mean, we're definitely moving away from the chat box, but one of the things that OpenClaw had kind of introduced was this idea that instead of a chat box, I could talk to it in Telegram. I could talk to it in WhatsApp. I could talk to it in Teams. And I just talk to it like I talk to anybody else in Teams or anywhere else. So it's still natural language is probably the way to phrase it, but it's really just having a conversation, right? I just pop into Teams and, click on and just start talking to it like I would talk to you. So it feels more natural to me. And I think that was another thing that this guy that put this thing together had kind of seen a little differently than the way Microsoft was looking at it, where you'd go to a chat somewhere and have a chat.
One other sort of unrelated topic that's been on my mind, and I'd love to get your perspective on, is how your clients are sort of managing or what their experience has been with managing costs as it relates to running AI within their business against their business data, their business systems. I'm sure it's not one size fits all, but can you give us any perspective on that?
I think we're getting a point now to we're able to understand better the patterns that drive cost and be able to better optimize what we're doing. A lot of it has to do with the way these models are built, right? I mean, you start a conversation with a model and it's using up so many tokens for that answer. And then you ask a follow-up question and it's reloading the whole conversation up to that point and then adding more. So it kind of builds, it's like compounding tokens. And most of that is unnecessary. If you've been talking to that thing for, 2 hours, you've compounded this massive mountain of information and shoved into every one of them. So this is some things that you just kind of discover along the way. And we certainly discovered many people have understood some of the rules are starting to become understood now about how to optimize. So I would say that today, there's lots of things you can do. We've pre-wired this to do a bunch of those things by default, and there's other things people can just do to try and minimize cost. But I think that part of the challenge here is you have to look at what that cost is accomplishing. The goal isn't, can I get AI to run my entire business for $20 a month? That's not going to happen. And nor are you entitled to that. Your business never ran for $20 a month before. But if AI can take a load of work that used to cost X and accomplish it for half of X, which is completely reasonable, it should be less than that, you're ahead of the game. So I would say if you're not spending any money on AI, you're not getting the value out of AI that's there. And there's a lot of people out there that are really trying to, I want to put a tight nozzle on that and block it from doing what? From doing anything good for your business. You're just choking it from being able to accomplish anything and complaining about costs. So, you got to pay to play in anything. And this is no different, but we're spending as much as any company our size is probably spending on tokens, and I don't regret a penny of it. I mean, the value has been obvious to us. Every step of the way, it's been obvious. I would like to figure out more ways to spend more tokens efficiently. I don't want to waste tokens. That's no good. But the more tokens that I'm spending efficiently, the more value I'm getting out of this. So I think people are kind of looking at cost. I mean, I think there's a couple of misnomers. One of them is that people over-focusing on token cost instead of the value that they're getting from them. And it's perfectly valid if they're not using it efficiently. That'd be a waste of money. The other one I think that's held some people on the sidelines is this story going out there that, well, if your data is, bad, then you're not going to get any value from AI. And that's not at all true. And that's been a reason why a lot of people have kind of stayed on the sidelines. Oh, we can't go down the AI path yet. Our data is a mess. We got to clean all that up first. AI is pretty darn smart. I mean, I can point AI at a pile of bad data, and it can do a pretty good job of figuring out what's real, what isn't, surprisingly well. Frankly, better than the person probably can. It just has a better way of doing that. So I don't think that's that's great for the people that want to go in and sell data cleanup services. And obviously, we'd all love to have our data pristine, but nobody does. Nobody ever has. And we all still got by. I mean, AI was trained on all of the internet, which is anything but clean data, and was able to produce pretty good results. So I don't know why you feel like your business has to have a better standard of data than what these models are trained on in the first place.
So it's interesting to hear you talk about the data side of it and the data cleanup and some of the thinking about that, because I've certainly heard the other side of that it is worth waiting and doing a lot of that work first, or other areas too of sort of the fundamentals of, I guess, what you consider good enterprise IT practices in other areas too, security, workflow, sort of traditional workflow, probably some others too that I'm not thinking of. But anyway, that is all, like you said, work that services providers can do for their clients, work that they really want to do for their clients. And the point of my question is work that they are afraid is going to go away or won't work under an hourly billing time and materials model anymore. That and many other elements of what is traditional sort of enterprise application consulting will cease to exist in the way it does today. Not that experts aren't needed, but that the most upfront thing is, the idea that the billable hour is going to start becoming less and less relevant. How do you feel about that topic?
Yeah, it's a few things there. I think that the list of reasons that companies come up with to not move forward is enormous, and most are fake. I mean, they're just myths. So they're really not reasons so much as they are excuses to not do anything. And companies are historically, prone to try and come up with every justification in the world to not change or do anything. So I throw all that stuff in the same bucket. Oh, our data is too dirty. Oh, it's not safe. Oh, it's, it costs too much. I mean, there's every reason you can. I mean, if you want to come up with a bunch of fake reasons to not move forward and progress your company, go ahead. We heard the same things in the move from on-premise to cloud back in the day. Eventually, you'll either be here or you will be gone. There's a whole bunch of companies that resisted moving to the cloud that, if not gone, at least took a heck of a shot by not moving sooner. But I say that all the time. And still, most people don't want to live on the bleeding edge, if you will. And I'm not even talking about bleeding edge. I'm just talking about you better watch to the right and the left of you what your competition's doing and at least keep pace. You don't want to be the one that's sliding behind, but many will. So I think that's one of the challenges. What was the other part of your question?
Whether the engagement model from service providers really will have to change as a result.
Frankly, I had felt that the hourly model should have died a death a long time ago. I never felt that was a good business model. It incentivized the wrong behavior from a partner. Wait a minute. The slower I work, the more money I make. That never made sense. Customers had this idea that it gave them more control, but no, you didn't have any control over that at all. You don't even know what, wire up a server connector even means, much less, whether 5 hours or 20 hours was adequate to do it. So it was really an illusion of control. We moved ForceWorks over to a subscription model, which is still not a perfect model. I don't know that there is a perfect model, but it's better. I mean, they're paying a flat monthly cost for whatever it is they need, and then we just have to deal with that internally because you have to somehow remove the antagonistic layer for the relationship between service provider and customer. When you're trying to buy a car, you walk in the dealership immediately, your arms crossed as soon as the salesman walks out. This is the beginning of a potentially antagonistic relationship. I want what you have, but I'm going to have to fight you to get it. And that's not dissimilar to partners. They're all walking, take people out to dinner. Everybody's all smiling. But, behind the scenes, brewing is an antagonistic relationship about to start, potentially ending up in a lawsuit. Happens frequently enough. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. So I don't know that AI adds anything to that battle. There's still going to be, obviously with what we're trying to do with RapidClaw is to remove barriers to a customer being able to deploy this. And to a degree that obviously removes the need for us to help them deploy this. But once they start, I think there's still opportunity for partners when a customer gets their first taste of real ROI at some level from deploying anything, whether it was moved to the cloud, whether it was building apps, whether it's now with AI. Once they get a taste of the potential ROI, they're going to want more. We saw this with the Power Apps of Microsoft Citizen Developer Motion, hey, build your own apps. You don't even need partners. They did all but say that. And yeah, there was a whole bunch of shitty little apps built by people out there that at least exposed some ideas of what could be done where they then brought in real people. I think partners that'll be challenged now will be the ones that don't actually have any real skills in the space. They're sitting on an old toolbox that they've been lugging around for years. They haven't learned the new stuff. They're AI doomers. They want to spend all day talking about how horrible AI is. While you're doing that, there's other partners that are moving forward. And that's where customers will be. Look where the puck is going, not where it was. So there's going to be a shift. We're going to see more people moving into the space from other spaces. The provider space has been heavy with technical people. And AI is kind of breaking that down a little bit, right? I mean, it's able to do a lot of technical things that technical people used to do. With technical people, I used to think, I can ask a seasoned software developer to build something. They'll build the most amazing thing that you could ever imagine. The problem is they can't imagine anything to build. They were always, this exquisite tool without the ability to figure out what to bang it on. So there's going to be more of a need for that now with AI. What's a viable problem I can point this at before it even gets to, okay, now how do I put it together to accomplish that goal? And I think that's going to start shifting the makeup of the partner of the future. There's going to be less need for the deeply technical. Yeah, still need. Certainly, you can't just go out here and have a whole bunch of goofballs vibe code in the world, but less need than there was, and they can argue that all they want. You can say, vibe coding or whatever produces a bunch of bugs. Well, it still produces 100 times more code than you could in an hour. And even with a few bugs, the time it takes to clean it up, it's on net miles ahead of you. So you can point at whatever, you can nitpick anything you want, but you're wrong. You're just wrong. But that's, talking about this OpenClaw coming into Microsoft 2 months ago, Satya Nadella's on an interview out there comparing it to a virus, So in 2 months, the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world has now kind of changed his mind. His first reaction, though, was defensive. We got Copilot. This thing's coming after. No, this thing's like a virus. Sure, scare everybody off. An alternative because of what you've got. And that's, I think, where a lot of the practitioners in our space are now. Is they're just afraid of what's coming, and they should be if they don't. But you can't just sit on your old toolbox and scream at the cloud. You gotta move forward.
Yeah, it's like, what do they really want to hold on to really tightly and guard, and what are they going to be smarter about and let grow in an open source environment or some other way? And what are you really going to fight for? And Microsoft and some of these other massive corporations might really spin their wheels digging in on the wrong thing.
Well, user-based licensing. In my mind, in this space we're moving into, user-based licensing is not going to make any sense anymore. We're deploying this RapidClaw, which is bringing in 10, not real people that don't require a license. They're all just engaging through the API on an environment with maybe one user license. Well, that's not going to work. How does anybody make money there? Now, obviously, they're having to pay token usage. So the whole per user license model is under threat. I wouldn't say under threat. I think it's ripe for disruption. It needs to be, just like the hourly model was ripe for disruption.
There's no scenario here in the Microsoft sort of sphere or, walled garden where they're collecting less revenue from their BizApps customers. That's just not part of their plan. So one way or another, they will work this out on their systems anyway, that you're not saving any money.
One of the approaches is this Agent 365 idea, right? That an agent is a person in your organization, just like a user, and you buy them, again, a license like you would a user. Some agents are obviously more valuable than others, but you're going to pay the same for all of them. Well, I guess you did for users as well. In the consumption space, where you're using AI models through, say, Foundry, that Microsoft is presumably buying at some sort of a discount for the provider, some kind of a wholesale, and then offering it retail, but that retail still has to be comparable to what you could buy direct. Otherwise, why would you ever buy through them? So there's not any room left in that pie for partner margin. I don't think there's any partner margin being made right now on model consumption, because there's just no room in that pie to do it right now. That'll be the next move, I think, though, from Microsoft, is they're going to have to figure out a way to, okay, we got Azure consumption, partners can make money on Azure consumption. We're going to have to also figure out a way they can make money on model consumption, because, what we're deploying goes on a Microsoft VM. That VM is probably going to cost $40 a month. So, there's not much consumption there. The consumption is going to be happening on the model side. So they're going to need to figure out a way to activate that, to give partners a place to actually shift to. I mean, it's one thing to disrupt and pivot yourself, but you got to have a place to pivot.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I think this is a great point to do it. Congratulations on the launch of RapidClaw. And I hope we can check in again soon.
We'll do. We'll give you an update.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Steve for joining me. We've put some links in the show notes, and if you want to get in touch with me, you can send me an email, jason@msdynamicsworld.com. For all of our updates, please do follow us on LinkedIn. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.